Welcome to What No One Knows, the podcast that tells the secret behind the published books, hosted by Lisa Marie Garcia, the Chief Operating Officer of Now Publishing, a full-service book publishing and author PR firm. Through the years in the publishing industry, we've heard the statement over and over, "This is what no one knows," when we interview would-be authors wishing to tell their story. This is what this podcast is all about. And now to our podcast and our host, Lisa Marie Garcia.
Hello, this is Lisa Marie Garcia, and thank you for listening to another episode of What No One Knows. So this morning, we have Dr. June Hall joining us. I'm so excited to speak with her. I have to say, I don't have to read her bio. I can just say it in a sentence. She's one of the most positive people I know. And as we talk to her, you're going to hear how she spreads this positivity through everything that she does. And she's really made it her life mission. So I will actually say a little bit about her bio, and I'll let you know that she's been an educator and a facilitator for over 20 years now. She was also a syndicated advice columnist for 12 years. There's just a lot you can Google about her during those times. It's super fun. She's an associate professor of psychology. And she started what we're going to talk about today, a word that is sort of her own word that she defined called APT, accentuate positive thinking. So she's a speaker and spreads her message of positivity. So I just want to say thank you, Dr. June Hall, for joining us. And I'm excited for our chat today.
Thank you. Me too. I'm excited. Uber
excited?
I said I'm Ubers of excited.
See, there you go. Inventing new words and phrases. So let's start there because, you and I have known each other now. I want to think it's been about 5 years. Does that sound right?
It sounds right.
Yeah, it seems like, 15 or 20, because I consider you a professional friend. I consider you a friend, period. And then we know each other professionally. But I want to talk. I remember the very first time I met you, and actually you handed me one of your magazines, and we'll talk about that at some length as well. But I remember, reading the word Apptacious and saying to myself, hold it. What is this word? Should I know this word? Tell us about what that means, being Apptacious for you, and how did that develop, please?
It's so funny because people are like, is that a word? I think they look it up in the dictionary. But my business is Time to Apt, and Apt, APT, stands for Accentuate Positive Thinking. And so when I wanted to do the first conference, which started as a luncheon and built up to a conference, my husband and I were like, well, what shall we call it? We didn't want to call it Time to Apt. We wanted to make it something interesting. And I don't know, I think we were eating something and it was like, oh, that's delicious. And then it was like, oh, Apptacious. And so that's how the word Apptacious came about. So it's just basically your ability to live a positive lifestyle, to know how to cope with when things go awry in the world. And so it's just something that we came up with to help people learn how to remember the positive in their life.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit more about that, though. It's one thing to come up with the concept and to say, let's do this or let's do that. And because, again, I've known you for a while, I've been to many of your conferences and, I watch you through how you spread your positivity. I mean, how are you? I think people, at least I always wonder, how do you find your motivation? How do you, keep looking forward in new ways as digital marketing is always changing? How do you, keep yourself there at the forefront to be this leader in positivity?
Because I was not always a positive person. I went through some trials in myself, even, had a bout with cancer. And I had different things in my life in a period of time that were not going well. And I did not handle it well because I was pretty much a happy child. My mom, when she found out she was pregnant with me, she decided that she wanted to make sure that I was happy. And my siblings say they never saw her laugh so much. And my dad he was a funny person. So it was a lot of laughter in our house. But then when I started going through some things, I did not cope well. And one day I was praying and it just came to me, no more pity parties, which, and that's what I call my first book. And I said that, you know what, whenever there is something distressful going on in your life, you have to remember there is something good still going on in your life. And in my life, even though I was going through distress, I still had my husband who was very supportive. I was physically ill, but I survived the surgery. And even though, it took me a while to get better, I had to realize that, you know what, we can't be wallowing in self pity. There's too much life to live regardless. And so I just said, people need to understand that whenever there's something that's not great, if you go on the flip side, there is something that's still great. I have a friend who was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer not too long ago. And she just finished chemo. She had surgery. She's still going through some treatments. But do you know that, I don't know, 2-3 times a week, she gets up and does an exercise video? I mean, you can still see the scars on her and when she wears her exercise outfits or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? That right there is an example. And so we have no excuse not to get up and still go on with our life just because we may be going through something that's, really bad or really negative.
I'm so glad you shared that, and also bringing up the No More Pity Party book that you wrote, which is fabulous. I think I saw it years ago at the first Apptacious annual conference that I went to. I was going to ask you to share, a story about maybe a client or someone that you've taught that or learned from that No More Pity Parties, because not only is that the title of your book, but I've heard you say it. I've heard you speak on it, and I've heard you just say it in who you are and what you impart. It brought me back to, I'm going to share a little story about myself right now, because it did bring me back to this idea that I felt like I was very fortunate. This is maybe 8 years ago, I guess it's been, since I went through my divorce. Of course, you know me, I went through, quite a long and treacherous, legal field, expensive divorce. But what happened to me during that divorce, which really could have knocked me down and kept me down for a while, what happened to me is 2 women that were one of my very closest friends and my very closest friend circle of, maybe 4 tops. One of them got breast cancer, had a double mastectomy right away and was going through that. And the other one was losing her father to like ALS, I believe, and was having to travel 4 hours a day to go see him. And so right in the middle of my going through my divorce, here were these women that I love that were my friends, going through this. So obviously I wasn't having any pity party that I was telling them about. I wasn't going to share about my baloney going on because it paled in comparison, right? But it also taught me, because, through my divorce was a couple of years long and their struggles were about that long too. It really made me not look at myself and not be sorry for myself and not have the pity parties, like you said. So I'm really fortunate that was right there in my face. And it did help me, understand that. And we talk about that, right? We talk about, how do you, when you're not feeling so Apptacious, when you're not feeling so positive, what's one of the best ways out of it? And it's serving and helping others and looking at others and not looking at yourself, right?
That is correct. And I say that, no one is happy all the time. That's unrealistic. We go through things in life. That's just how it is. Job went through, the scriptures, he went through some really tragic things in life. Right. So it happens. However, we can't just wallow in it. I mean, you cry, you be distressed for, a minute or two. Not, I'm exaggerating when I say a minute, but you know what I mean. But then you pick yourself up, you take care of yourself, you take care of someone else, like you said, your friends were going through some things, other people, you can volunteer and help other people who may be going through some things. So that's really a great way to help yourself not feel so horrible being a pity party. And the other, as I somewhat mentioned, is what I call a positivity journal, an Apptacious journal, is when you are going through that, you need to take a moment and write down what is still good in your life. Like, you, Lisa, have those 2 beautiful daughters, and, you have to remember, oh my God, I have these beautiful girls. And whoever, whatever your situation is, that there's something good happening in your life.
That's exactly right. The Positivity Journal. It's such a great idea. And it's that place that you can even you go look to, right? You go look at
Right.
when, when you're tired. And honestly, and thank you so much for complimenting my daughters. And I will tell our listeners, let them know that one of the great programs that Dr. June Hall, did during the summer, not COVID, not this last year, but I think the year
Right.
previous. Yeah, was the middle school. You did a middle school camp, and middle school. Yeah, they were both middle school girls, and there was a number of other girls there, and it was just super fun and super positive, and I just really appreciated that you were reaching back in the community for that to that age group and
Yes,
starting.
I think that's a really important. I think that they sometimes get overlooked. The little kids, there's a gazillion things for the little kids, elementary, high schoolers, they're kind of, able to do a little bit of their own thing and kind of make some other decisions. But that area right there, that middle school, they're kind of overlooked, which is why I did that. And that's also a pivotal time in their life, how, especially girls, the self-esteem, how they feel about themselves, who they are as a person and that type of thing. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's so funny because people call me. They said, "Are you having your camp?" I'm like, no, there's a pandemic going on. But people really enjoyed it, and other people heard about it. People I didn't even have in the camp prior were calling because they had heard about it, because we did something different every day. I mean, we did self-esteem, we did, table manners. We just did a lot of good things that was fun. So, and made the girls feel good about themselves. I have to tell you, I mean, I'm so touched by this. I was in, I don't know, I was in some store, department store, grocery store or something, and this was after the camp. And one of the parents, they saw me and recognized me. They weren't with their daughters, and she spoke to me and she said, "Oh my God, my daughter is still talking about your camp." And she said she's telling her brother, this is what we did, and like she'll remind her brother how to do something that she learned in the camp. And I was so touched by that. I was just like, wow, it makes me feel so good. That is really what I want, to help other people and have them remember and to be able to use that to make them feel better. That just does something to my spirit.
That's the key. That's the ticket. And you should feel proud. And I'm another mom that's saying, thank you so much for that camp. My girls loved it. I loved our conversations after I picked them up. And you're right. It's now as a high school mom, that middle school time frame was a very, distinctive and special time. So I'm again grateful. And you know what? I'm on board to help you next summer. Let's do a 2021 middle school camp. I'd love to help. And the community needs it, Dr. June. The community needs
Yes.
it. So, all right. Well, what I'd like to ask you about is, I know that you recently was surrounded by high school students. I want you to let's talk to that age group just for a moment before we switch topics here. And I'm curious to get an assessment of what you think, what that experience gained you, and what advice maybe you'd give to listeners of high school students. So, of course, I'm listening from that time, Dr. June.
That's kind of a hard question to answer, because the high schoolers I were teaching actually are seniors who were taking college level classes. So it was kind of like more of a college level high schoolers rather than general high schoolers. So that's kind of hard for me to answer. But my thing is, you should always let them communicate with you, because if you start not allowing, I'm sorry, let me try to say this the way that I want it to be said. If you don't allow them to share what's happening with them, even though it might be freaking you out a little bit as a parent, then they may stop communicating. I guess that's the best way that I can phrase it. Because sometimes they want to share information with you, and they may want to tell you about a friend, and you'll be like, "Oh my God, that's your friend, you shouldn't be with them," or whatever. And so even though you might be freaking out on the inside, you can't show it on the outside. So they can still talk to you.
That's such great advice. That is such great advice. I think that for me, there is a little bit of element of that, especially when some particular friend seems to be repeating